Ever get that feeling like you're just spinning your wheels spiritually?
Yeah.
Like doing all the right things, checking all the boxes, but feeling kind of oddly disconnected?
Oh, yeah, totally.
That's what we're going to dive into today. It's that classic struggle to find balance between, serving God and actually nurturing a real relationship with Him.
It's a tension you see all over, in different faiths and philosophies,
Yeah.
that pull between what you do, the actions, and that inner connection.
Right, right.
And we've got a podcast episode. It's called Choosing the Right Balance, Service versus Relationship with God.
Okay.
And a devotional text we're looking at, and they both wrestle with this idea.
And they use some really interesting examples, too, like the story of Martha and Mary.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
Martha's running around getting the meal ready, and Mary's just sitting there at Jesus' feet, taking it all in.
Oh, yeah.
Such a great image, right? That tension between, doing and being.
Yeah, absolutely. And that podcast, it actually warns against getting so caught up in the doing and all the busyness of service that we lose sight of, why are we even doing this?
Correct.
It's like we become these spiritual workhorses, but are we really, truly connecting with the heart of our faith? I don't know.
It's almost like we're trying to earn our spot.
Right?
Prove we're worthy by being busy, instead of just relaxing into that relationship.
Totally. And that's where that parable of the prodigal son comes in, specifically that older brother.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The podcast uses him as a cautionary tale. He's the one who stayed home, did all the work, was dutiful, but then when the brother comes back, he's full of resentment.
Yeah, he's all like, hey, I've been slaving away here. Where's my party?
Exactly.
It's like he missed the whole point of forgiveness and grace and all that.
Completely missed it. And the devotional text, it gets even deeper into the psychology of that older brother. It suggests that, his resentment, it comes from this place of insecurity, right? He's basing his self-worth on what he's done, not on just being a son.
Wow. So his service, instead of being like an expression of love, it's actually hiding this deep insecurity and fear.
Yeah.
That's a powerful insight.
It is, and it makes you wonder, right? How often are we falling into that same trap? Are we serving out of a genuine desire to connect, or are we just trying to, earn something, prove something?
That's a really good question for all of us.
Yeah.
Because if our service is coming from that place of insecurity, it's going to feel, heavy, burdensome, even resentful.
Yeah.
And it's not going to lead to that deep and joyful connection we all want.
Yeah, for sure. And that brings us to another big point that both the podcast and the devotional really hit on, this idea that having a relationship with God, with a higher power, it shouldn't be an option.
Yeah.
It should be a necessity. It's got to be there.
Like Mary, right? Choosing that better part. Just sitting at Jesus' feet, being present. It wasn't about being lazy or anything. It was about recognizing that real connection is the foundation.
Exactly. The devotional even says that this connection should be non-negotiable. It's not something you earn.
Right.
It's already there, just waiting to be nurtured.
It's like we're already loved, already accepted. And all our efforts, all our service, it should just flow from that place of love and connection, not from this place of striving and fear.
And when you can make that shift from striving to just being, it can be incredibly freeing,
Oh, absolutely.
You can let go of having to prove yourself and just rest in that knowledge that you are loved as you are.
Okay, so we've got Martha and Mary, we've got the older brother's story.
Yeah.
But how do we actually bring this into everyday life? How do we not fall into that disconnected service trap?
Well, the podcast uses that older brother story to help us spot the signs that we might be slipping into that pattern.
Yeah.
It says to pay attention to, why are we doing this? Are we serving out of love, or are we doing it because we need that validation? Are we really connected to the purpose of our actions, or are we just going through the motions?
Those are some tough questions.
Yeah, you are.
But I feel like that kind of self-reflection can lead to some big breakthroughs.
I think so too. And the devotional takes it even further. It points out the danger of missing out on a real connection with that higher power because we're so focused on doing all the right things outwardly.
So it's not about giving up service altogether.
No, not at all.
It's about making sure it comes from that place of love and connection, genuine desire, not obligation or fear.
Exactly. And both sources actually have some really helpful ideas about how to cultivate that deeper connection and make sure our actions are lining up with what our hearts truly want.
So how do we actually make that shift? From this insecure, disconnected service to something where what we're doing really lines up with our hearts. What those sources have to say about getting there.
Well, they both mentioned something really interesting, this idea of letting go.
Oh,
Not like a letting go of responsibility or anything.
Right.
but letting go of that constant need to like control things, to manage, to earn our worthiness.
Ooh, I like that. Tell me more about that.
Think about that verse, cast your cares upon the Lord.
Yeah.
Both the podcast and the devotional, they use that as a starting point. It's not about just giving up or ignoring things.
Right.
It's about
Wow.
surrendering all that anxious energy,
Yeah.
that striving, and trusting that we're taken care of.
So it ties back to that feeling of already being worthy, already being loved,
Yeah.
without having to prove it all the time.
Exactly. It's like a whole different way of looking at things. And it lets us approach our service, all our actions, from a place of peace, of freedom, instead of that anxious, I got to achieve something, earn something.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, when you're constantly worried and stressed, you're not exactly like radiating love and connection,
Yeah.
right?
Not really. It'd be like trying to have a deep conversation with someone while you're also checking your phone and planning out your grocery list. You're just not fully there.
Oh, yeah. I do that all the time.
And that's really what both those sources are saying, to just be fully present in our relationship with the divine, however we see that, even when life is busy.
And the podcast had some pretty practical tips for like how to actually do that, how to cultivate that presence, like prayer, Bible study, even just finding quiet moments throughout the day.
Yeah, exactly. And they emphasized how important it is to take small steps, consistent ones.
Okay.
It's not about these big gestures or fancy rituals. It's those little moments, intentional connection. And all those little moments, they add up to a bigger picture,
So it's like working a muscle.
Exactly.
The more we practice choosing that connection, the easier it gets.
Right. And the
Yeah.
devotional had this beautiful way of describing it. It talked about asking for the grace to choose connection over all those distractions.
Right.
It acknowledged we're human, we get pulled in all sorts of directions, but we can always recenter, come back to that quiet place.
What strikes me is that these practices, these ideas, they're not just for people who follow a specific religion.
Totally agree.
They can apply to anyone.
It's about that human desire to connect, to find meaning, to connect to something bigger than ourselves. And those practices, prayer, meditation, finding stillness, they're all ways to tap into that part of us.
So even if someone listening isn't really religious, they can still benefit from all this.
Absolutely. It's about finding what works for you, what speaks to you, and weaving it into your life. Maybe it's a few minutes of quiet in the morning, a walk in nature, listening to some calming music, anything like that. There are so many ways to get to that inner stillness.
And the cool thing is, both sources pointed out that this isn't just good for us, It affects everything around us, too.
Yeah, it ripples outward.
Our relationships, our work, the whole world.
Exactly. When we're grounded in that sense of connection, we show up differently. We're more patient, more understanding, more present, more lined up with what we're meant to do.
And that creates a more peaceful experience for everyone around us. It's like this positive feedback loop. The more inner peace we cultivate, the more peace we add to the world.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It really all comes back to how interconnected everything is. We're not isolated. We're part of this big, amazing tapestry. And when we focus on that connection inside ourselves, it naturally spreads outward, making a more beautiful world.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How, taking care of our own inner world can actually make a difference in the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that that big changes don't always need those huge actions, Sometimes the most powerful shifts are the ones that start quietly, internally.
And that's where I think this whole choosing the better part idea comes in. It's not about, ditching all our responsibilities and becoming hermits or something.
Right.
It's more about shifting how we see things, putting that interconnection first. So everything we do comes from a place of, wholeness instead of feeling drained.
Yeah. And both of those sources, they really made it clear that this isn't just a one-time decision, It's a practice, something you keep working on, keep adjusting. We're human, we get distracted, caught up in all the craziness, but we can always come back to center, Choose connection over all that chaos.
It's like we're given this inner compass, this guidance system.
Oh, I like that.
And yeah, sometimes we wander off course.
Yeah.
But we can always find our way back to true north, so to speak.
That's a great analogy. And the more we use that compass, the better we get at hearing what it's telling us. It's like we build up this spiritual muscle memory, this natural instinct toward wholeness,
So as we're wrapping up our deep dive here, I'm curious, what really stood out to you from all this? What are you going to take with you?
For me, it was that that feeling of permission to let go of all that striving. It's so easy to get stuck on that hamster wheel of achieving, like we have to constantly prove ourselves.
Oh, for sure.
But these sources, they reminded me that we're already worthy just by being here.
Hmm.
And that's such a freeing thought.
That's beautifully said. And for me, I think the biggest takeaway was that that power of those small, consistent actions, it's easy to get overwhelmed by this whole spiritual journey thing, like we need to change everything all at once.
Yeah.
But they reminded us that even those little moments of connection, like a few minutes of prayer, a walk outside, even just taking a deep breath, those things can have a ripple effect that goes way beyond us.
It's true. Transformation often happens in those quiet moments, those little moments of grace that we don't always see.
Absolutely. So to everyone listening, we'll leave you with this. If you were to take this idea of choosing the better part right now, in this moment, what would that look like for you? What little step could you take to nourish your soul, to cultivate that peace and connection inside yourself?
And remember, even the smallest act of kindness toward yourself, it can ripple outward and make the world a little bit more beautiful, a little bit more loving.
So go out there, choose that better part, and let your light shine.